Hello, my name is Lloyd Hatcher. Welcome to Deliverable 2, using visuals to enhance viewer perception. So what is the reality of urban versus suburban living? There are many differences. The one thing to consider when comparing urban and suburban life is the difference in cultural diversity. In a downtown core, you'll meet people from all over the world and hear a range of different languages and be exposed to a range of different opinions. The further into the suburbs you go, the more standardized your range of experiences will be. In some suburbs, the range of dining options are limited to chain restaurants and food courts and malls, where urban areas usually offer more options of experiences. In comparing the cultural differences in playgrounds in urban areas versus suburban areas, I have pictures that will describe two different familiarities. The urban playground paints a picture of tightness, a park surrounded by buildings and skyscrapers, which is pretty much universal for city life. More people condensed into a tighter space, especially depending on the city. The suburban park is more open, painting a picture of more space and easy living feel. The urban playground has a fence around it depicting the need for security. Being in the city, park and playgrounds can be a breeding ground for shady business, especially after dark. Having a gate around the park creates a barrier to keep that space safe. Suburb park is open, giving one a feeling of security. And statistically, crime rate in the city is much higher than that in the suburbs. The cultural differences is the terrain. People who live in a city, especially inner city, parks are not used to grass, but a durable ground covering such as cement, turf, or even sand. Suburban parks usually do not use turf, but mulch since access to those resources are much more available. Both parks have kids playing, but inner city parks usually are more diverse, where suburban parks are being a byproduct of suburbs are usually more standardized. So what separates cities and suburbs isn't always a geographic boundary. The cognitive elements that arise by looking at both pictures are dramatically different. When one looks at an urban setting, one can think of a fast-paced setting, more business app, nightlife, and I think most importantly, crime. According to a Gala report 2017, cities have been linked to higher rates of PTSD. According to research that began examining patients at Chicago Stroger Hospital in Cook County, which treats nearly 2,000 patients a year for traumatic injuries such as gunshots and stabbings, they found that more than 40% of the patients they screened showed signs of PTSD and lived in the city. This is a great example of one's cognitive thinking based on exposure and even experience. Urban environments are highly restrictive. Space limitations restrict what one can do. The flurry of rules, laws, and regulations meant to help people get along just become stress and limit on one's activities. So too does competition for crowded facilities to exercise, play sports, or just go for a walk. Suburbanization and American roots come from many different reasons, prime of which is the American dream. People prefer the suburbs because the low density habitation, nature reduces complexity in living. City dwellers have to deal with the motives of other individuals as their proximity forces interaction. Suburban living gives greater control in the forms of more space, possibly more freedom of domicile alteration, and other benefits like a strong feeling of being in nature. Cognitively, suburbs feel safe with less crime, and when one thinks of suburban life, one thinks of relaxation, wholesomeness, and family orientated. To sum this up, Domsky in 2018 stated it perfectly. It's important to pay attention to that lived experience because it really drives how people perceive their communities. People relate to their environments emotionally. There can be a wide range of differences in one's emotional connection to either suburb or urban settings. Urban settings can be emotional, exciting for those who like fast-paced settings, business people who like to have access to resources. For example, I have friends who live on the north side of Chicago and love it. They can walk to almost anything, including Wrigley Field. And these types of emotions might not be for the same people who live in other parts of the city. Like parts of the south side of Chicago have seen huge spikes in shootings. So their emotional connection is probably the polar opposite of my friends. Suburb life and living usually invokes a feeling of happiness with safe emotions, emotions of freedom and space. There might also be some that don't like the space because in part one needs to drive to get to places. Entertainment and food might be limited, so one becomes emotionally detached, striving to move to an urban setting to reconnect emotionally to their likes. Both settings have positive and negative emotional feelings. It just depends on the person. Semiotics, according to Science Salad, is an investigation into how meaning is created and how meaning is communicated. Its origins lies in the academic study of how signs and symbols Visually and linguistic create meaning. Semiotics can be broken down into metonymic, analogical, displaced, and condensed. When looking at both pictures, metonymic codes are a collection of signs that cause the viewer to make assumptions. In my opinion, looking at both pictures, the playground metonymic codes is fun and happiness. No matter the location of a playground, when one sees a playground, the automatic assumption is children having fun. An analogical code is a group of signs that make mental comparisons. So for the urban playground, the mental comparison could be kids playing in a park like animals stuck in a cage. And for the suburban playground, it's similar to free range, where kids have room to roam free. A displaced code is a transfer of meaning from one set of signs to another. So the blue ground in the urban setting gives meaning to a body of water, thus meaning the park is in a chaotic atmosphere, and the blue displays a meaning of calmness. The suburban park has wood chips to connect the park to nature and openness. A condensed code are combined signs forming new messages. The definition of the city and what a city stands for is basically the population that includes and being surrounded by buildings. As suburbs have grown in North America, retail trade has followed population of suburbs, in which retail corporations and developers have created large centrally managed malls and retail parks. In terms of services, more upscale malls resemble the higher-end department stores with boutiques embedded in them. Certain residential area materials have also gradually evolved in semiotic signs when applied to human shelter, producing meaning specific to the human groups residing in those dwellings. For example, gated communities in the suburbs, projects in the city. Semiology, therefore, provides the interpreter with a means of accessing how signs are deployed and understood. It enables the interpretation of the underlying meanings within one's self-output and how one accepts, rejects, and redefines those meanings. Thank you.